Coming up today on The Nice Guys on Business.
Like, do you have a culture that celebrates failure? Do you have a culture that celebrates risk-taking? And do you have a culture that celebrates, hey, Doug, you can bring your crazy ideas here. We want to hear them. Because at some point, you're going to pick a winner, right? So the more that you can encourage that in your team, and that's the relationship between empathy and innovation, is because when you have an empathetic environment and people feel seen, heard, and valued, they're more likely to speak up. They're more likely to point out opportunities. They're more likely to point out risks, and they're more likely to take chances that will move the company forward.
We need to talk about your TPS reports and the Nice Guys on Business. Go from where you are now to where you could be. Get expert tips to grow your business, to be more productive and more efficient, whether you're trying to build influence, grow your community, or make it rain. Best-selling author of Nice Guys Finish First, Doug Sandler, can lead the way. The Nice Guys on Business is produced by Turnkey Podcast Productions. Now, here's your host, Doug Sandler.
All right, nice guy community. How can being a nice guy, as the podcast title implies, help you finish first, as my book title implies? How can empathy be used not as a tool, but rather as a way to connect with your team, build your customer base, and build you as a person? Well, today's rock star, Maria Ross, has spent a career on the subject of empathy. She's an author, a podcast host, a speaker, an empathy advocate. Maria, I'm excited to have you back on The Nice Guys. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
December of 2020. So you were finished your first, but you had written your first book already, didn't you? Empathy Edge?
Yeah, that was actually my third book, but yeah, it was my first book about empathy. And it hit a nerve. And that was right before lockdown and the pandemic and all that stuff. So we are now having much more discussion around empathy in the workplace, and empathy is a leadership catalyst.
Well, yeah, and I'm not going to make this a political conversation at all, but in light of some of the candidates that are running, sometimes empathy is not necessarily at the forefront of leadership when it comes to some of the leaders of our country, or proposed leaders of the country. I'm not saying a word though, about that. So I want to go back to 2020 and the pandemic for just a moment. You had just recently launched a podcast. You had thank you for all of the business, and thank you for being a hugely valuable client to Turnkey. We love having you, and our team loves talking about you at the production meetings. You've never heard them, but behind the scenes, you're a rock star to us.
Hopefully.
And, always good to have that. You've written 4 books. Most of the time, people are, they're creators of content in a few different categories, but to be an author, a podcaster, a speaker, how do you get your arms around all that stuff and still have the energy to actually deliver what you deliver as a pro?
I don't. No. No.
Okay. All right.
I am getting better about that. I really, I kind of flipped a switch in my business several years ago, where I realized that I needed to invest in help, that I actually had to outsource the things that were not the best use of my time and were actually, to your point, sucking my energy. So when I needed to be at those high energy levels to deliver brand strategy, or to deliver a keynote, or to deliver training, I was spent. And so really investing in virtual assistants and finding the right ones and figuring out, this is something that I don't need to be worrying about, and someone else who's better at it can worry about it, which is what led me to Turnkey Podcasting versus like trying to figure it out myself. I think a lot of solopreneurs get caught in that trap like, I've got to do everything myself.
Yeah, I agree. And I can remember early on for Strickland and I've talked about this many times on the show, but staying in your zone of genius, me staying in the relationship build and selling, and him staying in the process and systems growth. And once I started to find myself in a spreadsheet, or he found himself doing any kind of relationship build or selling, we found like we were uncomfortable, and our company suffered as a result of it, until we started bringing in people to do the stuff that we were really, frankly, crappy at. It made it really challenging for us to grow. So you have all of these things that are on your plate. I know you probably pull some energy from an audience when you are doing a keynote speech, and you pull some energy from your guest as you are doing an interview on your podcast. How do you how do you find that? How do you find that level of energy? How do you find that thing that you really love in the things that you do, or is it just come naturally to you?
Well, this is so interesting because it actually ties into some content from the new book, from the Empathy Dilemma. In that book, I talk about how leaders can be both empathetic but high performing at the same time, how they can be people focused but also performance focused. And it's based on 5 pillars that effective and empathetic leaders have really strong as their foundation. And 2 of them relate to exactly what you're talking about. One of them is about self-care.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being cognizant of when your tank is not full and making sure that you're disengaging and figuring out a way to recharge and rejuvenate. And so it doesn't have to be like massages, but it could be whatever energizes you and gets your brain thinking in a different way. So for some people, that's really active. It could be rock climbing or training for a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
For other people, it is yoga and meditation and, sitting with a cup of coffee and a good book. But being aware enough as a leader and as an entrepreneur to know what is it that charges your battery again? What is it that gives you strength? And listening to your body. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned in recent years from taking all this on is there are mornings or days where I'm like, I'm not feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to force it. And I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to walk my dog. I'm going to sit and watch game shows, like whatever it is I need to do. The second pillar that's really applicable to this is joy, because joy is an element of empathetic teams and being able to create a team and an environment of psychological safety, both for yourself and for the people that work with you. And so again, that comes back to what lights you up, what energizes you, where can you find those moments of levity in the work, even when the work is hard. And I spoke to, everyone from neurosurgeons in life-threatening situations to tech CEOs who, are trying to figure out how to get the best out of their teams. And they all sort of have this thread. And it doesn't look the same for everyone because funny or light is not the same thing for everyone. But what is it that can bring you joy in the slog? It doesn't mean that the work is always fun, but when the work is not fun, where can you find those moments of camaraderie? Where can you find those moments of levity? Can you create fun Slack channels for your team to let off some steam? Can you do some really great team building activities that don't feel like forced fun, but are actually fun for people, whether it's beer tasting or making a succulent garden or doing something like that with a different part of your brain. I think that's what I've been more in tune to in the last few years. That's enabled me to keep going and keep the engine running.
The leaders that you work with, you're probably not walking into an environment where the leaders that are bringing you in are saying, "Hey, look, I don't care about the pain, just show me the baby." You're probably not dealing with a lot of those leaders. You probably are dealing with a more conscious kind of leader, but at the same time, you don't want to have a leader that is on the other side, a people pleaser that just completely kowtows to everything that their team says. How do you what's the word? How do you create a diagnosis when you start with a company so that you know their leadership style so that you're not completely rubbing them the wrong way? Or maybe that doesn't matter. You just are going in and you share this is what the plan is because you've brought me in to even tell you you're doing something wrong. How do you deal with that?
Well, it's funny because before I sort of got in the empathy game, I was doing just strict brand strategy, brand messaging conversations. And so honestly, not every leader was the leader you're describing. There were a lot of holes, there were a lot of gaps, there was a lot of dysfunction sometimes with some of the teams that I was working with cross-functionally. And, I will say that those projects were less successful because the leader didn't set the tone or didn't know what was going on or had contempt for their customers, whatever the different flavor of that was. And so as I started to recognize the link, and I think as marketers, we all know that empathy is important to effective marketing, really understanding our customers and our clients, but actually putting that together to say, how does it also help the team operate most effectively? Now I'm much more discerning about those brand clients I bring on. I'm doing less of that work now, but I'm being very exclusive about who I choose to partner with. And so part of my discernment process is, do you believe in an empathetic culture? Even if you know that you're just giving it lip service at this point, is it something you're striving for? Are you striving to actually get to know and truly serve your customers or your clients? Or are you just looking at them as cash machines? right?
Oh, sorry, you keep
No, go
going.
ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, how are leaders ignorant to the fact that there is a connection between empathy and leadership with your team and empathy with your potential clients or your current clients? There is such a broad overlap. Like if you can't understand the problems that your customers are experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
you don't deserve to be selling products to them. Secondly, if you can't understand the problems that your team is experiencing, you should not be delegated to lead that team. How do
Mm-hmm.
leaders not? I mean, I'm assuming there are still tons of people that don't understand that and don't connect that.
Tons. Yeah. I mean, these are unfortunately that's the routine, right? It's the
Keeping us in
outliers that
business,
are
keeping you in business, though, right?
keeping us all in business, right? But that's my goal with the empathy work, is to make the empathetic leaders normalized, not the outliers, so that the ones that are sort of, I hate to say it so judgmentally, but behaving badly are not the norm. They're not the ones getting the promotions. They're not the ones succeeding in their career.
Right. Right.
But I think, it comes down to impact, and those leaders who understand that it's people first and purpose first, and my job is to enable these people to do their best work, they just naturally over the course of their career have more success. And whether they attribute it to the way that they're leading or not remains to be seen. I interviewed a lot of empathetic but effective leaders for my book, and some of them were sort of like, I don't understand why you're talking to me. And it's, well, you've been identified as this, and I've actually personally seen it. And so there's an element of humility there with a lot of those leaders. But I also believe that a lot of it is fear. A lot of it is fear of leading in a different way, leading in a people-focused way, people who are covering up, whether they're male or female, their own imposter syndrome.
Mm.
And you can tell because, we all know bullies operate from fear. So when you have those quote unquote toxic bosses, or you have those even toxic clients to a certain extent,
Yep.
you know that there's some fear-based drive behind that. And so if you can sort of, meet them with empathy, if you're choosing to engage,
Right.
meeting them with empathy and trying to get under the hood of what's going on for them, and really listening and giving them space to feel okay with saying, I don't have all the answers. Can you, Doug, as a consultant, or can you, Maria, as a consultant, actually help us? Then you can open the door to them, showing them that this will help you be more successful. And it's when you're able to unlock that the magic happens.
Do you find that it is more obvious to a company or leadership that you're speaking to relate the situation that they have going on between the company and their customers versus the company and their team? And there is a direct connection between how leaders treat their team and the results that they actually get on the street, because a toxic leadership environment leads to a toxic environment where, man, wouldn't it be great if if we only didn't have to deal with our clients and our and our staff? Life would be great. That's like the worst kind of leadership to have. But where do you find that people are more focused, the customer or the team?
I think they're more focused on the customer because that's what generates revenue, right? And so they're sort of, that's a blind spot for them, of realizing that the culture that they've created, that they've modeled, that they've rewarded, they probably didn't go into the office saying, hey, we're going to create a culture where everyone's going to treat each other like crap. Is everyone cool with that? Like, they're not intentionally doing it, but by the things they're not doing, or the things that they're modeling that they don't think other people are watching or paying attention to, right? I worked for a large software company one time, and the head of marketing used to send flame emails to shame people, to everyone in the department.
What's a flame email? I don't even know what that is.
Like just berating someone for doing something quote unquote stupid.
Oh, geez.
Right. And publicly embarrassing them. And that was their method of, I don't know, getting results. I have no idea what was behind that. But if you're not aware enough to know that that's how you're treating people, and put that together with why our sales might be plateauing, why are our customers churning so quickly, then that's kind of on you as a leader. I always like to say, people get promoted because they're really good doers. But what we teach less is actually how to lead people. Like, that's what happens when you get to those levels, is your job is different. You're not the doer anymore. Your whole reason for being is to empower people to do their best work. And there's just people that can't make that jump, whether it's because of their own bad experiences or their own poor models in their career. And so I kind of have a lot of empathy for those people to a certain extent. But once they're educated and you open their eyes and they still refuse to change, then that's on them.
I'd love to hear your definition, or maybe your connection, or if you could bring it together, because I can see an obvious connection, but I don't know that I'm going to explain it right. But you probably can make the connection for our audience. There is absolutely a connection between empathetic leadership and innovation within an organization. So can you
Yes.
maybe just comment about that? Because I see it every day within Turnkey, but I want you to share a little bit.
I'm like freaking out because there's so much data and research on this exact topic. Like there's just one I can cite for you was a study done by it's escaping me where the source was, but I can find it later. And it's one I cite in my talks a lot. It was thousands of workers, some of which said, yes, I work in an empathetic team or have an empathetic manager. And a bunch of them that said, no, my team is not empathetic. My leader is not empathetic. Then they compared the deltas of their answers to questions like, I can be innovative at work. 60% over 60% of the people who said they were on an empathetic team agreed that they are able to be more innovative at work. Right. Versus less than, I think it was 28% from the team that didn't. Yeah, there are direct links between empathetic culture and innovation. Google proved this with studies they did in the early 2000s, mid 2010s, in terms of what makes up a team that produces innovation. Empathy, communication, collaboration, not necessarily the smartest engineers in the room.
No, totally. I mean, can you imagine living in that environment where the flame emails go out to the team and having a quote unquote a stupid idea? You know, can you imagine that? Because it's not the person that's just angry with the team, the leader that's angry with the team member that has made a mistake, but it's the one that has an idea that may not be a floatable idea or an idea that will actually work. That's got to be super challenging.
Yeah. Do you have a culture that celebrates failure? Do you have a culture that celebrates risk taking? And do you have a culture that celebrates, hey, Doug, you can bring your crazy ideas here. We want to hear them, because at some point you're going to pick a winner, right? So the more that you can encourage that in your team, and that's the relationship between empathy and innovation, is because when you have an empathetic environment and people feel seen, heard, and valued, they're more likely to speak up. They're more likely to point out opportunities. They're more likely to point out risks, and they're more likely to take chances that will move the company forward.
When did empathy become a KPI? Because I'm really curious. Well, I mean, can you measure empathy? But you probably can to a certain degree. But when did it become like this measurable thing that we want to be able to aspire to?
Yeah, actually, there were different ways that different companies are trying to measure empathy per se. And I actually advise empathy is not the outcome that you want to measure. Empathy is the input to the outcome you want to measure.
True. Very true.
What are your actual objectives as a company? Is it reducing customer churn? Is it increasing revenue? Is it, increasing the number of referrals? What's the actual revenue related objective that you have? And then when you layer in the empathetic environment, it sort of supercharges it, right? It's like a superfood for that.
Does that look like, though, surveys? Does that look like personal visits to a client? Does it look like asking him what problems are we not solving for you? What does that look like every day? Because empathy as a word is, hey, I just want to show compassion and I want to show build a relationship with a customer. But what's it look like in an everyday practice?
So it looks like having conversations with your customers and clients, not just when things go wrong or they complain. It's being in lockstep with them as they evolve and as their needs change. So that could look like surveys, that can look like interviews, that can look like a user conference, whatever it is, where you're taking the feedback, and then do you have a process to take action on that feedback? The only thing worse than not asking for feedback is asking for feedback and not doing anything with it, right? Right. The second way is sort of, how are you training your people internally? That's why, when I wrote The Empathy Edge, the book before this one, it was really about leader, culture, and then brand. So you have to get the leadership and the culture empathetic before the brand can be creating an empathetic customer experience. So, what's going on internally? What are your reward structures? What are your policies? What are your processes? What's your customer buying experience like? What is your return experience like? What is your experience like when someone has a negative experience? And are you arming the people in your organization with skill building, with leadership development, with empathy training, with all of those things so they know how to handle that situation. There was a study done by, I think it was Genesis and mycustomer.com, where 97% of customers said empathy is the most important aspect of the customer experience.
Oh my gosh.
And this
yes.
was, if you dug into the actual report, it was even if their problem wasn't solved.
Oh yeah, completely.
Yeah.
I get it. It's like just contacting a customer to say, "Hey, look, we're working on this. We haven't solved the problem yet, but I apologize that you're dealing with this problem. We're working on it." Even if you don't have it, the lack of communication is probably 10x the detriment to your company than the I'm sorry. Just take the hit for just literally 10 seconds. And if you do it right, you have a customer that's like, "Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate you at least updating me."
But here's how you don't do it right, is where you blanketly just, and this happened to me in a customer service experience with an online retail shop. They did something with the shipment to a client that kind of got screwed up. And it was like, not just that this got screwed up, but it really impacted my brand and my reputation, right? The response, without even like acknowledging what I had explained, was just, "Oh, we're really sorry. Here's a 15% off coupon on your next purchase."
That's like that shows no personalization to the product.
Exactly. There's no like, "Hey, let's dig into this. Let's figure out how we can make this better for the next person. Let's, we're really sorry that happened. We really understand the importance of that."
Yeah.
Instead, they tried to buy me off as an empathetic gesture.
Right. Or coupon it, promo code it away.
Exactly. And that just made me never want to buy from them again. Right. Even though they said all the words, they said all that. So that's where like training goes awry, of just like,
well,
not
that's checking a box off. That's checking a box off.
Exactly.
This is how we've not empowered our people, but to tell our people what empathy is. Empathy is a coupon, or empathy is a promo
people
code.
Pleasing. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Not good.
So,
not good.
versus like experiences I'm sure you've had where even if they couldn't do anything about it, they were like, "Oh man, I'd be shocked if I got that fee on my bill too. Let me look into that. Let me see what's going on with that." Unfortunately, I can't do anything about it, but what would be best for you? Would a future coupon be good, or
it's
something
interesting
else?
that you say all this stuff because oftentimes as a partner, and I love Strickland and Nice Guy Community, I love Strickland. We're here every week. We've been doing this for 10 years.
Now?
No, I just want to share this because I think it's so interesting, because I think my entire career has been based upon being an empathetic business owner to my clients. I am very surprised sometimes when my team won't or haven't yet reached out to a client to say, "We realize," they just go into problem solving mode. So they're working behind the scenes as hard as they can, and God love them. I appreciate them taking action quickly, but they didn't tell the customer that they're taking action. So it's almost like you're just working to solve the problem, but you haven't yet focused on what is the customer thinking at this point. And Strickland and I have had this conversation many times. I'm so busy with my head in the fixing the problem, I forgot to come up and realize, hey, what does Maria think about this problem? And are we working towards a resolution? Even if it's just, "Hey, Maria, sorry this is happening. I just want to let you know my team is working behind the scenes right now to fix this thing. I will be back in touch with you as quickly as I can within the next 24 hours. That oftentimes is not an argument between me and Strick, but it's almost like I go into problem solving mode. He's telling me, I'm like, well, just remind the customer you're going into problem solving mode.
Right.
Bought yourself some more time. You're doing yourself a favor.
Totally. Yeah. And that's about the clarity pillar that I have in the new book. It's like really being crystal clear with expectations and what's next. And sometimes that means a leader might have to just continually check in and say, "Here's what we still don't know," or "We're still working on that. We still don't have a resolution." We can just, think about when your flight's delayed and they tell you your flight's delayed and then they don't give you an update for an hour.
Or they just
even if they came back every 15 minutes and said, "Hey, they're still working on this.
We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on."
There's a great ad from I'm dating myself. It was decades ago. It was actually a TV ad for United Airlines. It was like in the 90s. And it showed a bunch of airline workers, like flight attendants, pilots, whatever. They were in sort of like a training room. And there was no audio. I mean, there was no explanation. They were just in this room and you could tell they'd been waiting a while. They kept cutting to the clock. showing the time passing, people getting really agitated. So clearly, like, they were there for some meeting or some training, and
Right.
it was just getting delayed and getting delayed. And so
Right.
they're starting to get mad. They're starting to get like, I don't know what's going on. The trainer or whoever was leading the meeting walks into the room and they're sort of like pissed. And they go, now you know how it feels when your flight's delayed and
Hell
nobody gives you
yeah. Hell
any
yeah.
information. And that was like an exercise in empathy of just like, think about it from their point of view. They want to make sure you didn't forget they were there.
Yeah.
Even if you're here to say, I still don't have the problem fixed yet, but I want to let you know that I'm working on it.
I never understand why why a leader within an organization does not focus everything on the customer experience, because you do two things when you do that. Number one, you make sure that you retain your customers and you avoid customer churn and all of that and drop off. The other thing that you do is you're reminding your team that empathy is an important perspective to be able to offer to in the scenario. And oftentimes as a leader, I want to offer them the same empathy as I'm like, I have a billion customers. Not my end user, the guy that pays me, the Maria Rosses of the world are not my only customers. Every team member is my customer too.
Yes.
And if I don't make them happy, they will stop doing their job.
Right. And it's not even about making them happy per se. It's just communication. It's just connection. It's just, having the respect to say that, you need to be in touch with people and check in with them and make sure you know what's going on for them. And, I talked in the new book and I've talked on my podcast about, making tough business decisions with empathy. They don't always make people happy. When you lay off thousands of workers, that doesn't make people happy. But the way that you do it can show empathy. It can show empathy for the person that's impacted by the layoff and the survivors that are left.
Yeah.
And I have a story in the new book from a leader that said, we knew it was just as important to show the folks we had left that were looking at all the empty chairs that we cared about people and that we cared enough about their friends that we treated them with respect and compassion.
We always talk about at Turnkey, mistakes are bound to happen. It's what happens next that really counts, because that's really the thing.
Yeah.
When first of all, could you maybe cite an example? I don't want to throw you under the bus here or talk about your company at all, anything negative, but do you recall any negative experience, empathetic experience, or experience where empathy needed to be shared with a customer of yours because you may have been in the look, I know this didn't go exactly the way we want, and I respect the fact that you had to deal with this problem. I appreciate you as a client. Have you had to share empathy with customers of yours? I'd love to hear
all the time. And especially, now I'm an independent consultant. I worked in corporate for decades. But, especially now when it's you and it's your reputation, it's about showing empathy. I've had some really horrible client experiences where I was like abused. My integrity was questioned over someone else misunderstanding what we were delivering and what we were there to do. And I feel like I handled it with as much empathy as I could, but I also made sure that I was protecting my own personal boundaries, that's where the balance is. These folks that get burned out by being too empathetic, often it's because what they're doing is not empathy. It's people pleasing or submission or whatever, but you can stand your ground and understand someone's point of view. And I've had to have some conversations where it was like, I didn't want to do it, but I was like, let's have a follow-up conversation about what went wrong, because I want to understand and I want to hear your point of view. And I just wanted to give them space to be heard.
Right.
And so,
sometimes that's enough though. Isn't that sometimes that really
it
does such a great thing is like, I know I'm just about to get a whole bunch of shit, but I want to listen and I want to hear. You obviously don't say that to them.
Right. And some of it's not true. And you just have to sort of and that's where you have to be strong enough and confident enough to say, take it in. And then you can address, okay, well, I hear what you're saying. This is valid. This is valid. Actually, what you've said here is not true. And if you go back to the contract, if there was not clarity there for you about that, then that's something else we can talk about. But this was never promised to you.
Right.
You know what I mean? That sort of thing.
When did you realize that this was your thing? Have you always been? I mean, sometimes it requires this being empathetic as a characteristic to be innate. Sometimes it's not if it's forced, or you got that leader that's, I don't care about the pain, just show me the baby. Sometimes it's hard to really get that into their system until they start to see some solid results. But were you always like this?
I don't know if I always realized it was empathy. I wouldn't say I wasn't one of those people that was walking around going, I'm such a natural empath. Like I take everything in, I wasn't that
Right.
type of person, but I was always a person who was trying to understand things I didn't understand. So for example, when I worked in an ad agency, I spent more time on the creative floor than I did on the account management floor. And it kind of made me a freak. But I
Mhm.
wanted to understand the process that was going on for the creative team. When I was in tech, I was actually spending a lot of time as a marketer talking to the technologists, talking to the programmers,
Right.
figuring out how the stuff actually worked so we could create messaging that would resonate. And people were always shocked that someone from marketing was coming into their like cubicle farm to talk to them. And I just thought, well, how else can I do my job if I don't understand? Even if it went over my
Right.
head and I
Right.
couldn't really understand it, at least I would vet the accuracy of the claims I was going to make to the market with the people that knew. And that always endeared me to them. That always was sort of like, hey, marketing's not so bad. I was able to like rep marketing in a good way because it wasn't just a bunch of like bubbleheads making slides. It was people that actually wanted to understand how the technology worked. And I found myself doing a lot of listening in those environments, partly because I didn't always understand what they were saying, but but also because
Understood.
I was like, let me try to understand how this technology works, and maybe, hey, can I bounce off you if I describe it this way in a way that more people will understand? Is that accurate if I say it this way? And you'd get these engineers going, oh, I never thought of describing it that way, that kind of thing. So I think it was always there. And then I started to realize that. And then I took a Clifton Strengths Finders test, and empathy was one of my top 5 strengths. And I started putting it together of like, hey, this could be something that I could talk about. Because I mean, you know me, like I have an edge. I'm not a shrinking violet. I'm not, I'm mushy. I'm a mushy hearted
I,
person, but I'm not
I would,
overly woo woo.
I would, I mean, I'm hoping this isn't going to hurt you here, but I would never think that you have an edge. I don't know that I've seen an edge in you. I mean,
Really?
I mean, you have
My New
things that you want.
Yorker comes out though sometimes.
I, I don't see it. Maybe I'm just so used to being on the sales side of things that
I
rejection
think
is just one of
so.
those things that I'm just like, okay, well, sorry, let's fix this. It's like
Yeah.
I'm a problem solver. I want to go into problem
Yeah.
solving mode, but at the same time, I am empathetic, and I always want to understand
Right.
what you're experiencing as a customer. And the same thing
Yeah.
with my team. I always want to know if you're not in
Yeah.
the best spot as a team member, let's find the best spot for you because I don't want to lose you as a team member.
Right. And people don't want to come to work and fail every day either. And that's
Right.
why,
Right.
difficult performance evaluations are something I write about in the new book because that's actually empathetic. It's not empathetic to avoid that kind of conversation because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And
Right.
what you
Right.
get from people who are naturally empathic is they will say something like that. They will say, well, I've avoided having the confrontation or the conversation because I just know they're going through a really rough time and I don't want to hurt their feelings. And it just wasn't a good time. That's actually less empathetic because you're leaving someone hanging.
Yeah,
So
a nice guy community. Just know this: you can be a tough leader and still be an empathic leader. You
both
can.
and this is my whole thing. It's both and we can be empathetic and we can be high performing. We can be empathetic, we can be ambitious, and
Right.
we can be empathetic without burning out or
Right.
impacting our own mental health.
Or taking the risk, because a lot of times people that provide a huge amount of empathy are also the ones that say, I will take care of it, don't worry about it. There's a
Yes,
difference
yes.
between don't take on all of the roles. Get a
No,
copy of The Empathy Dilemma. We'll make sure we put a link in the show notes so that you have access to that. Congratulations on writing another book.
thank you.
I want to talk about the podcast for just a quick
Let's
second
talk about the
too,
podcast.
since I know it near and dear to my heart. You've been at this for 4 years now. You've probably
Yep.
done how many episodes do you have out there now?
It's 200
250.
plus because it's been one a week for 4 years and then plus like a bonus episode here and there.
Yeah. So how have you gotten, or what have you gotten out of you're building relationships with the people you're putting in your guest seat. You
Hmm.
go peer to peer with some people. You have
Hmm.
potential customers sitting in the seats. Sometimes you
Hmm.
have, you have larger conversations that are take over, in a series of episodes. What do you enjoy so much about the putting together of your guest
Hmm.
list or your
Yeah.
questions, or what do you like about it?
I like talking to people that, one of the things I learned, and this will probably be no surprise to you, is that curiosity is one of the number one traits of empathic people.
Yeah.
So I am just curious. I like having conversations. And the podcast came out after the first empathy book, The Empathy Edge, because after I stopped researching the book, I was missing those conversations. I was in book promotion mode. So I launched the podcast as a way to keep the conversations going. But what it brought to me was the ability to make connections with people and just be able to approach someone with, hey, I like the work you're doing. I love the people-centered leader that you seem to be. Would you like to have a conversation on my podcast?
Yeah.
And I've gotten to meet so many interesting people, plus getting pitched now from placement agencies with people I never would have found. I'm like, these people are so cool.
Yep.
So that's been great to expand my network, to expand my opportunities to speak and train. But also I have to say, this second book, like 80% of that content is from all the podcast episodes and the interviews that I ran. And it was because of those conversations that it led me to formulate the second book, the second empathy book. So it was really fodder for content and for future projects that I wanted to put into place. And I've built some great partnerships with people as well.
Maybe a part of the Pro Podcaster Roundtable. I know you're a part of that. Maybe it's something that you can bring up. Hey, look, I wrote an entire book based upon the content that I've created. Because I keep thinking about, man, we've done 1,550 episodes of our show. I could take every interview and turn that into a post, every post, and turn that into a page in the book. And, I'd have a 1,000 page book by the time I'm done, which of course I don't want to have. But at the same time, it's like all of these amazing pieces of content that get created from the podcast.
Yeah, it's been great. And, obviously I was continuing to do research and things like that, but it actually helped me keep the research fresh. It helped me stay in the conversation about empathy, find out what leaders were doing, and just be exposed to all these great CEOs and founders who are doing cool stuff from all over the world.
Yep.
And I never would have had that opportunity. I guess you could just reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, let's talk. But it was just much more effective to be able to bring people onto a podcast and then be able to give them exposure and amplify them. I love using my platform to amplify other people doing cool work.
Well, it's a win-win-win. It's a win for your guest because they're exposing their message to your audience. It's a win for your audience because you're teaching them and they're learning. And it's a potential win for you because here's a relationship that you may not have had an opportunity to make had you not had the podcast. I use it every day for that. We were doing 5 episodes a week in our busiest, and I'm like, this is way too much content. This is way too much content.
That's a lot. That's a lot. I can barely keep up with
my
one
team.
week.
Yeah. I hear you.
The other great thing too is that it also can showcase you in whatever, for me, I like doing speaking and training. And so having a marketing vehicle that showcases how I show up versus me just putting videos out on social media all the time is a really great way that they can see me engaging with other people and being able to think on my feet and, guide a conversation in a certain way. And that really helps when they're looking for speakers to come in and not just have a canned presentation, but hey, can you bring some dynamism to this?
Totally agree and totally hear you. And for those of you that are in a position to bring Maria into your organization, I'm sure she would not be adverse to coming in and talking about her subject matter on the subject of empathy.
Not at all.
The other cool thing about it is, and you wouldn't know this nice guy community, but Maria is exactly as she is on the air. She is off the air too. She brings the same energy, the same level of professionalism, and the same wonderful smile. So Maria, I so appreciate you sharing again. Somewhere around episode, I don't know what it is, 1,560 or 70. This will be this one.
Oh my gosh.
So you're doing great, and I'm excited to have you back on the show. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Doug, for everything.
Hey, nice guy community, never underestimate the power of nice or the power of empathy. A special thanks to Maria Ross. All of her information, including access to her book and her podcast and her website, will be right there in the show notes. Steve O'Brien, go ahead and take us out of here.
For the Nice Guys on Business, I'm Steve O'Brien. Don't underestimate the power of nice.